Hello out there, and today we're going to be taking a look at the newly released Kershaw Highball. And this is a knife that when it was first released, I had a lot of interest in it just because of the lines of the knife. Just a really good looking design. Definitely piqued my interest that Kershaw was going with D2 on this one and maybe providing something a little bit more classy than, say, just your typical budget knife. But for a few reasons, I held off from getting one, and I have to thank my buddy Big Red over at Big Red EDC for sending this one my way to check out, along with a couple other knives from Kershaw's 2020 line. This one I think is called the Air Lock or the Air Frame, Air something. And so, yeah, I'll be doing a video on this one relatively soon. He also sent the slip joint from this year, the Culpeper. So yeah, very cool of him because obviously I'm very interested in what Kershaw is doing, but I'm not able to get every single one of their knives. So being able to send a few knives his way and get a few in return for us to equally check out is really helpful. So again, link to his channel down below. Definitely check him out. So I got this knife in hand, was really impressed with it, and let me just show you how impressed I was. All right. So that's your biggest endorsement right there. Like, there's not going to be a better endorsement. This is by no means a perfect knife, but it was one that once I checked out, I knew I really wanted it myself. We'll talk about value and just how this one just makes a whole lot of sense in just a bit. But let's get started with all the important things, getting into some size comparison, weight, and all the good stuff that you need to know. All right, so taking a look at the size of this knife, this is just a very user-friendly, EDC-friendly kind of size. Fits right in line with the mini griptilian. So here it is next to that mini grip, very similar kind of cutting edge, looking at right around 3 inches, a little bit sub 3 inches, and then an overall length that is just under 7 inches total. So yep, really agreeable for a lot of people. If you're taking a look at some like the smaller EDC kind of knives, this is going to be larger than those. So it's larger than the Pete from earlier this year. Let me see, I think I have a squid right here. It's definitely larger than that. Also have a, oh, let's take a look. Here's that Launch 11. What's the size comparison there? Oh, it's pretty much the same. How about that? All right. And just for fun, because we have to, really not a good comparison with the PM2. But this knife does have a number of things going for it. The weight is really agreeable. Not sure who is really that particular about weight, but with the stainless steel frame lock, you're always going to be interested in just how it's machined and if there is any kind of like weight relief. The good news is that there is some weight relief. The weight, let's see if we can get that in focus, 3.06 ounces. So pretty darn light. And if you look at the frame itself, it's not the thinnest frame either. You know, it's relatively thin, but there is a good amount of weight relief. I will insert a picture of the knife disassembled so you can just see how that actually is. So from this point, it definitely is checking out. And the biggest place where it checks out is just the aesthetics. Very, very good looking. One of the things I said about the recent Kershaw NORAD was the same kind of thing with the two-tone blade. When Kershaw uses this kind of coating, I think it's PVD, and I always get it wrong every time I try to name what the coating is. There's 50 different coatings, and I always say the wrong one. But every time they use this coating, if they use it on the part of the blade, like the grind, it's going to just get worn, and it's going to look like crap very quickly. So what's the one from last year that I really liked? The futuristic kind of one. That knife definitely showed wear almost immediately when it came to using it because you had this coating that just does not hold up. Having the grind nice and satin sort of keeps you from dealing with that wear, and it keeps the aesthetics of the knife intact longer. And I definitely have had, you know, good luck with that with the NORAD thus far. I mean, this knife still looks pretty darn good except for a couple rust spots in the D2 steel that yeah, just lack of maintenance maybe. But getting back to the Highball, so I am happy with one, the look of the knife and just the way they do that. It's smart. All right, sticking with the blade, it did perform pretty well, but it isn't going to be anything crazy as far as excellent performance, at least not in my opinion. A lot of knives that are small like this, you just get a really good amount of sliciness with them, but this is a flat grind that isn't particularly thin. and it could be a lot thinner, and it is going to cut just fine. And for my purposes, it's not going to be an issue at all. But that said, it just isn't like super thin, so it's not going to be the best slicer out there. The steel is D2. Like I said earlier, very nice to see that they are, coming with an upgraded model sort of right out of the gate. Kershaw does make more budget stuff than not budget stuff at this point. And so it is nice to see that, hey, we're getting a little bit better steel. I don't really need it, but it does sort of, I guess the best way of putting it is when Kershaw comes out with a model that is in D2, it just attracts more attention. And so the expectation for that knife, at least in my opinion, is a little bit higher. And so that was definitely the case here. And yeah, I mean, the D2, is it gonna rust? Maybe a little bit more than your other stuff. I mean, what I found with the NORAD here is that I'm using the knife a lot, and if I'm not cleaning it a lot, then a couple little spots are gonna pop up, and it's nothing major, but always something to be aware of. 8CR will actually be a little bit better than that as far as corrosion resistance, but again, take care of your stuff if you care about it, and it's not gonna be a big deal. The best thing, I think, as we move on back and talk about the way this is in hand, one of the best saving graces for this knife is the jimping. There are a lot of jimps. Lots of jimps. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 15 jimps. It's a lot of jimps. So it's grippy too. It's pretty good jimping. It's not the deepest. It's not the most aggressive, but it works. And that's definitely a good thing in this case, because there are a couple things with the ergos that, although the lines of the knife are very agreeable, the materials and the slickness maybe of this handle, which we'll talk about in just a second, could be a detriment. But the jimping is really good. As I like almost knocked the camera off. The jimping is really good, just in that there's a lot of it. And so even if you're choking up a little bit, the back of your thumb will be able to lock in pretty well. And then right here, this position, which is where I was almost the entire time I used it, just fine. So 0 issues whatsoever, 0 hot spots for me in this regard. It's a little bit slick. Again, we have this like coated frame, and it's really great looking. It's a nice, like, solid matte gray finish. Not gonna have a problem with that. But there's no points of contact. There's nothing about it that would aid any kind of ergos. And even though there aren't any sharp spots to hinder anything, it just, I don't know, it just isn't the most like user-friendly kind of scale. But that said, with the size of it, the way it locks in, it's not gonna be an issue regardless. So yeah, I think they got away with one there just because of the smart design overall. Speaking more on aesthetics, we do have this blue pivot collar. And again, it's just these little touches when you think about Kershaw and you think about getting value out of a knife, and a knife being better than what you paid for it, if that makes sense. That's the kind of thing that people look for. And I mean, it sure would be a boring knife if it was just all gray, and that blue does make a pretty big difference. Continuing to move on back, we do have a back spacer that is just sort of standard. One thing I really like about this knife, and I'm seeing it more and more and more, and I'm thrilled to see it, is that when we have a lanyard position, it is sort of built into the back of the frame and not really a big lanyard hole. So it's usable. You want to put a lanyard on, you can, but it's not going to mess with your position of the pocket clip. It's not going to put a hole in the lines of the knife. So kudos to Kershaw for doing it that way. When we get to the clip, it looks good. It looks fine. It's not reversible. It's really not the most functional clip that I've come across. It's not that easy to get into the pocket. It's not that easy to get out. So, yeah, not, not really great. So, does it look good in the pocket? Yes. Is it that big of a deal for me? No, because I'm really not that particular when it comes to clips. But I don't know what they could have done better, how they could have done it better, but it isn't great. Now let's talk about the most interesting, unique, different, not really controversial, but something that strikes me odd about this knife is the intended method of opening, because we don't have thumb studs, we don't have a flipper. It sort of looks like there should be a flipper, right? We don't have one. what we have is this groove, sort of like a fuller, I guess, to open the knife. It does make it look like it's a gent piece if you're opening it with two hands. If you have larger hands, that really might be the best way to open it, apart from, just popping it open. Now, what I'm able to do is Spidey flick, actually, just like with the NORAD. If you watch that video, it was just one of those like simple surprises. But the thing that kept me away from getting this knife at first was I want a knife that I'm going to be able to flick open and fidget with, and I just didn't think that this would be that. See, I can get it sometimes, but I can't get it every time, and it has to be at the right angle. So the Spidey flick works, but regular flicking it doesn't always work. Left-handed it did. But the other thing, when it comes to consistency, is that the two Highballs are very different when it comes to the detent and the action for that reason. So that's a big thing to be aware of, because I don't know what the sweet spot is here. I don't know what the consistency is going to be, more towards like the easy to open or the hard to open. So this one right here, I believe this is the one that Big Red sent me. No. Hold on. So this is the one Big Red sent me. This has a pretty stiff detent. Once you break that detent, the knife is flying. It's hard to flick. You can Spidey flick it. If you have small enough hands, you can get your finger in like that. But just regular thumb flicking it, extremely difficult. Mine is much easier. Much weaker detent. You can flick it. So, it's just different. And yeah, I prefer this. I would actually prefer something that's like sort of right in between, because this one is a little bit soft and a little bit too loose. I have lubricated mine. I have taken it apart, sure, but it was like that beforehand anyway. But it's a little bit of a concern if this kind of thing is important to you and you don't know which one you're going to get. You don't know what the norm is. Like, I don't know. Personally, opening the knife, like, that's fine regardless either way. So if you're not caring about anything like that, then it won't really be a big deal. But yeah, it is definitely something to keep in mind. But now let's go and talk a little bit more and show a little bit more of a demonstration of the action.
And now, back by popular demand, 30 seconds of uninterrupted, non-stop, unadulterated action.
So as I said, I have disassembled, I have lubricated this knife, so it is dropping a little bit more free than the one that Big Red owns that hasn't been disassembled. It's just basically stock. But also, like I said, the detent is a little bit different on both of them, so it's really hard to say what is exactly the way that yours would be if and when you buy it. If you do have one of these, definitely let me know in the comments below so that other people can check it out and get an idea of how this knife really is for them. But overall, when you take a look at the rest of like the fit and finish kind of stuff, the centering is very good. Lockup, which is always a big thing for me, is excellent. I really like that engagement sound too. That's that one. Let's hear this one. It's a good sounding knife. Yep. It's the little things, I guess. But here is the lockup. Very solid, up and down, left and right. Absolutely zero issues there. Overall, I think this is going to be a really high value knife. And Kershaw is sort of doing themselves a disservice in that they have a model like this that seems to be pretty darn good with maybe just a couple odd little X factors maybe, but it's pretty darn good. And at the $40 price point, I saw it on sale for under 30 this past week. So they're competing with themselves and some of their cheaper stuff, that it just doesn't make sense to buy that stuff when you can get this. And so as far as value goes, I think that if you're looking at some of the models for Kershaw this year, especially let's look at it next to the NORAD. I mean, this is a knife that we have pretty similar materials, maybe like different levels of machining and design, sure, but price point that, I mean, a lot of other companies are doing 8CR13 at this price point. Kershaw does 8CR13 at this price point, but here you're getting D2. So if that's one of those things that really matters to you, this is definitely going to be something to be aware of and maybe get your hands on. All right, guys. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this one. I think that it is just unique and odd enough to stand out. I definitely did have concerns with the ergos and just being able to open the knife, but certainly I figured it out. Does that mean that you're going to be able to, depending on hand size? Maybe not. So it's definitely going to be beauty in the eye of the beholder. But let me know. Let me know if you've had this one, how the D10 is on yours, what you think of it, how the ergos are. This definitely has a spot in Kershaw's lineup as a winner in my book, though. So any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, give a yell, let me know. But I will talk with you soon, guys. Thanks for watching and take care.